Testing on YouTube. Testing 1, 2, 3.
All right, we will call to order our regular meeting of council. And before we start, I would like to just acknowledge and recognize that we work, live, and play in the city of Port Alberni, which is situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Sechot and Hupachesset First Nations. Council, we do have an agenda in front of us, and I'll go to our corporate officer first because I believe we do have 2 late items.
Thank you. Through the mayor, late item number 1 is for correspondence. Item I1D, local government RCMP committee appointments. And then the second late item is item L11, which is UBCM Housing Summit 2024, Local Vision, Local Action Conference.
Thank you. I've noted those 2 late items. Council, are there any other late items to add? Seeing none, would somebody like to move approval of our agenda with the additional items? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And we have minutes from special meeting held at 9:30 a.m. and regular meeting held at 2 p.m. on January 8th, 2024 as presented. Move to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the minutes. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. We have no delegations today and no unfinished business, so we'll move on to staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Solda.
I'd love to give it to you, but I don't have the paperwork. So could we just go along?
Sure. We will, we'll come back to accounts when we get the account reading. So we'll move on to F. Sorry, there are no bylaws. We'll move to correspondence for action, and we have one item today. And I'll just go to our corporate officer to summarize that.
Thank you. This piece of correspondence is from Todd Doherty, he's the MP for Caribou Prince George. Email regarding, it's a January 9th email requesting that council display the 988 suicide crisis helpline poster in all facilities within the city to bring awareness of the national 3-digit suicide and crisis hotline.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
I move that council direct staff to display the 988 suicide crisis helpline poster in all city facilities.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dame. Any comments? Councillor Mealy.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just I support this. Obviously, I've just seen that since the introduction of this, they say on average they've helped over 1,000 people per day from what I've read, if I'm not mistaken. So this is good to be sharing for everyone.
Thank you. I think it's great information to share. And I did want to note as well that we do have Cluis Crisis Line that is operated locally and serves people around the province in crisis as well. So we are fortunate to have multiple options for people, and just wanted to highlight that local one as well. With that, would somebody like to move? Oh, sorry. No, it is moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Okay, and on to proclamations. Item number 1 is from the Kinsman Club of Port Alberni. Councillor Mealy, would you like to read this one?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor. I move the council on behalf of the Kinsmen of Port Alberni proclaim February 16th to 23rd, 2024 as Kinsmen in Kinet Week, and Port Alberni authorized flying the Kin Canada flag at City Hall in recognition.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. None opposed. Thank you. And item number 2 from Heritage BC. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read this one?
I'd like to move that council on behalf of Heritage BC proclaim the week of February 19th to the 25th, 2024 as Heritage Week in Port Alberni.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is actually something that's been talked about at the Heritage Commission meetings, and hopefully we'll have something exciting for that week.
Great to know. Thank you. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. On to correspondence for information, and I'll go to our corporate officer.
Thank you, through the mayor. First, we have from the Vancouver Island Regional Library a letter regarding the budget increase for 2024. And next, from the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General is a follow-up letter regarding the meeting at UBCM with the police resources and the city's high crime rate and the rising costs of policing. And then we have the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission minutes of December 6th. And then your late item, which is local government RCMP committee appointments. There are 4 vacancies that are required to be filled by local government elected officials or staff members. And if council was interested in appointing somebody to that committee, it needs to be done by February 1st.
Thank you very much. Okay, any items councillors would like to speak to? Seeing none, oh, Councillor Solda.
Just a quick one on the late one on the local government RCMP committee, because there's so much going on with our contract and everything. I wonder if a staff member should be appointed, Madam Mayor, like maybe our CAO or something like that, to talk about it, because we are going into contract management, and maybe that might be a route to go. I mean, I have been on that committee in the past, but because we are in negotiations and stuff like that, it might be worthwhile.
It does say BC elected officials, so I believe it's just for elected officials.
Or staff members.
Oh, okay, fantastic. I wonder if Councillor Patola possibly may be interested in us submitting his name. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I might, but I would have to think about it. I'm not in a position at this moment to make that type of commitment.
Thank you. I think that it's worthwhile if we could send a representative. I would love to, but I don't think I have the capacity to take on something additional right now. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, if Councillor Patola doesn't want to do it and he gets back, if he does want to do it, I'll submit my name. Thank you.
Thank you. So could we have a motion to support either Councillor Patola or Councillor Solda as a representative for this committee, if possible? Moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Patola. And we'll leave that to the two of them to work out, and then staff will consider or will coordinate submitting their names. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any other items from correspondence? Seeing none, then we'll move on. That's just for information. Yes, we'll go back to accounts. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated January 22nd, 2024 be received and checks numbered 154-182 to 154-286 and inclusive in payment of accounts totaling of $1,655,484.07 be approved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Carried. We're on to council reports. Any items councillors would like to speak to, either from their reports or additional? Councillor Douglas and then Councillor Solda.
Thank you. I'm not sure if we're able to show the report on the screen there, but if we do get it up, it's not that critical. I just wanted to mention I was really happy to be down on the CME property adjacent to Calnal Beach and see that they're taking some first steps in establishing a travel lift that'll enable them to accommodate larger vessels being lifted out and worked on, which is a real need on the west coast of the island here. And just also wanted to send out, I did have a report in there about the polar bear swim, and just wanted to send a thank you out to all the community. And there's some people that I probably neglected to mention in that report, such as the 600 people that came down. Just wanted to thank everybody for making that such a huge success. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick report on the airport. We just had a meeting last week, and I just wanted to say that a lot of people are asking about the tree removal, so that'll happen by the 15th of March, if not sooner. So that's a positive. It'll expand a little bit on the airport, and there's a draft budget February 14th going to be to the regional district, as well as an equipment shelter will be built at the airport. So, and of course, Wi-Fi. So that's a positive there for anybody that's using the airport. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I read the councillor reports with a lot of interest this week, particularly that put forward by Councillor Douglas with regards to the polar bear swim in January of this year. I'm glad that we have events like this in our town, and I wanted to extend a thank you to everyone who volunteered, whether they were mentioned in his report or not, and also to all those who attended. I think this is an important event in creating Port Alberni, a fun Port Alberni. We need more fun events here. It's with some reservation that I'm sad to say that the Port Alberni City Council was never given the opportunity to actually make this a city event. These are the types of things that I think a lot of council would support, and to make this contribute to making this a better place. But given that that didn't happen and the observation or the opportunity was never presented to City Council, I'm concerned by some of the statements in the report. Madam Mayor, I'm concerned that the report states this event has traditionally been a city-led initiative. So implying that it is still within that tradition, a city-led initiative, which it is not. And that in fact the city is so committed that the city created a beach in 2013 just for the polar bear swim to happen. Again, implying that this is a city-led initiative. And finally, at the end of the report, it blatantly produces a label of the city of Port Alberni, indicating that this is a city event. And I'm concerned by that because the city never endorsed this event as a city event. Although we support it as an individual's event, it is not a city event, and it's concerning to me that there are implications that tie the city to something that it's not properly tied to. The words of the musician philosopher are curiously appropriate at this point in time. Ridley Bent saying, "I'm Johnny Cash when I'm drinking. I'm the Clash when I'm thinking. I'm Mad Max when I'm driving. I'm Mike Diamond when I'm rhyming. I'm Humphrey Bogart when I'm smoking. I'm Bob Marley when I'm toking. And in bed when I'm dreaming, I'm a guitar slinging demon." Now, as you all roll your eyes, ask, how is this at all relevant? It's relevant in that, in his words, Mr. Bent is encouraging us to know who we are in every situation. For myself, when I sit at this table, I am Councillor Patola. That's what the name tag says. A title I also use when I'm representing the city in public. But at any other time, I'm just a guy. Just a guy named Todd. Just a guy named Todd, interested in the community and happy to share a refreshing beverage and talk about my ideas and your ideas to improve this community. Because to do otherwise than be just a guy risks acting like a tyrant, loosely defined as doing whatever I want without any authority. Now, I hear there is rumors that there is a member of this community who has good ideas and are supported by a lot of people. An individual by the name of John Douglas. It would be nice if John Douglas presented before Councillor as Councillor Douglas and brought his ideas to the City Council so they can be discussed. Until that happens though, Madam Mayor, I ask through you, will Councillor Douglas here and now clarify on the record that the January 24th Polar Bear Swim was a John Douglas event and not a city event of Port Alberni, and further that Councillor Douglas apologized to Council for misleading the public as to the city's involvement.
Thank you for your observations, Councillor Patola. I just want to state that I think we as members of council, unfortunately, are always members of council. And I think that this is a challenging thing, and it does make good intentions of being out in the community, doing good work, putting on fun events like this, somewhat difficult at times. Wherever I go, whether I want to take off my mayor hat and be a different person and state my opinions on things without the consequences of those being opinions of the mayor, the reality is I'm the mayor everywhere I go, and I think that that is something that we just take on with these roles, something that can be uncomfortable and difficult at times and can make it more challenging to be able to help with events. And I think sometimes it does make us have to go through additional process as a result and step back at times as a result, remembering that whether we are representing the city or not, it feels to members of the public that we are representing the city because we are always the people we are in our roles. I just want to say that I think the Polar Bear Swim was a fantastic event. I recognize that you noted that as well, Councillor Patola, and of great value to our community that was traditionally put on by the city. And as we know, that has changed over time and it's no longer a city-led event, and this year was not a city-led event as well. Certainly, Councillor Douglas has the opportunity to speak here if he would like, but I think it's really important to note that this is a good event for the community with certainly no ill intent to mislead, from my perspective anyways, that it has been a city event, but rather with our roles comes on occasion challenges in differentiating ourselves between those roles. So Councillor Douglas, just want to thank you for the work that you did in putting on that event for the community. And I think if we can take something away from this, it is a recognition of how challenging it can be at times to be both in our roles and community members who are looking to improve the community. We all know that there's challenges associated with kind of crossing that line at times unintentionally. And I think if there is a circumstance of that having happened, that absolutely, regardless, it was unintentional and not any ill intent. So that's from my perspective anyways. I'll just go to Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do appreciate the comments here today. Councillor Douglas, I thank you for putting on that event. I know Councillor Bertola has asked you to apologize to council as a whole, and I will let you know that I do not require an apology, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Solda.
So, Madam Mayor, because we all are involved in our community in that when I'm involved in the theater, I don't do a council report that I'm in a production or whatever I'm doing. So I'm wondering if you're not appointed in a committee or that, and you're not doing a councilor report, maybe a one-line item if you really want to do an advertisement of what you're doing or something like that. But that might be a good way to go. We've had other councillors that would report about different activities that they were doing in the committee, and I'm looking at them that weren't appointed to the committees, and I'm looking at them not here at this council, and wondering, why are you telling me this? I just want to know what you've done for the city. So that might be a route to look into.
I think that's a really good point. And I think this is stemming largely, this conversation, from this being included in council reports. So I think at minimum, there is an opportunity for us to recognize this challenge and make sure in the future that we are differentiating personal activities, which I think can still be talked about at council and are talked about at council on a regular basis when there's things going on in the community that we're aware of. I would, note Bulldogs games and yeah, absolutely. Councillor Mealy really regularly talks about events going on that he may not be appointed to as a councillor, but are still worthwhile community events that are valuable to the community. And so maybe there's an opportunity here to learn about the necessity of differentiating what is council related and what is not. Still noting that there's value in those non-council related items. Councillor Douglas, do you wish to have any comments today? Sorry, I've got Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to ask staff if ABC Towing had permission from the city to clear the beach of logs and debris. I'm just concerned about the liability of people coming and doing those kinds of things without permission from the city.
Mike.
Hi, through the chair, I don't believe the city was contacted before the removal of the logs. I know that there are some companies that are contracted to keep logs below the high water mark, clear of the valley, and again the whole area in the basin. And I'm not sure if that was the contract that it was done through, but if it was, then they wouldn't require city. If it was on city property, then they should have reached out to us.
Thank you for that. Councillor Douglas. Okay, thank you. Councillor Patola, any additional comments?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
I move that the council reports outlining recent meetings and events related to city business be received.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Moving on to new business. Item number 1, we have Connect the Keys Pathway, recommendation from the January 15th Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor Mealy, would you like to read this?
I'll make the motion for discussion, Madam Mayor, that the council approve the final 1.253.41, sorry, $1,253,411 in the 2024-2028 financial plan for the Connect the Keys Pathway project, ensuring the funding is available to action the project as planned, and completing the third and final stage along Dry Creek and Roger Creek following the required policies.
Thank you. And could I ask that we add to that motion specifying that the funds come from the Growing Communities Fund, as that was discussed at the Committee of the Whole, but not included in the motion?
Sure, I'll use that as a motion, Madam Mayor, or put that part of the motion.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patola. Okay, Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know I just moved it, but I will be voting against this motion today, and I'd like to talk a little bit about it. So in the information that we have received, a 1% increase is about $228,000. So if I'm not mistaken, this will be a 5 to 6% increase for this part. What I would like to see is not out of the Growing Communities Fund, Madam Mayor. I'd actually like to see this tied to the SOMAS land sale, potential sale. What I'd like to do is, and without trying to sound like somebody else in politics, is I just believe at this point we're asking more than what the people can give. And I think we should have a hold on this project until we can determine the SOMAS mill site, a sale of it, and then perhaps taking the money out of that. So I do understand the motion as set and the amendment, and I agreed to that for discussion, but that would be my take on this at this point, is to at least hold off for at least another year and have us reset that.
Thank you, Councillor Mealy. I would just note, just for clarity, I know that you understand this, but for the public, that if it comes from the Growing Communities Fund, there is not a tax increase as a result of it. That was approximately $5 million in grant funds that was given to the community from the province. So it would not come from general taxation and therefore wouldn't be a tax increase. But I do understand your points regardless. My one concern or a couple of concerns that I would have just with putting it off is, number one, if we're waiting on the sale of the SOMAS lands, we may very likely not, because we don't have details on the sale of the SOMAS lands yet, or even if it's going to be a sale versus lease or long-term project. We're still, as the public is aware, in negotiations around the final development agreement. I think we would go beyond the date, which is required by the province for us to complete the work and connect the keys. As a result, we could put our $2.5 million in grant funding at risk if we waited for that. And then largely what was discussed at the Committee of the Whole meeting and provided to us as information by staff would be, if we put the project off, there will be increased costs in the future as a result of just efficiencies in having the contractor come and do all of the paving in one session, which will be ready for this spring, I believe. So I think there was cost savings and efficiencies we were going to be earning as a result of doing the work all at once. So those would be my comments, and I'll go back to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do appreciate that. And yes, we did talk about that Committee of the Whole, at least the part where if we hold it off, the cost may go up. That part did come. But I did ask during the committee what the repercussions would be of not doing it, and it was kind of the question wasn't answered in my mind, and so I'm glad you said that, Madam Mayor. So I guess my question at this point is, what is that timeline? If we take it off the 5-year financial plan, is there time after that? Is the timeline in the next 2 years to build this? That was kind of what I was getting at the Committee of the Whole, and I didn't really get that, and with the repercussions of paying back the grant money. So I guess that was part that I didn't get answered at the Committee of the Whole, and I'd like to hear it if it's possible today.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really important context. And so I will say, and staff could come up and add to this as well if there's anything missed, but I believe the date we were provided that we need to have the project complete was mid-2025. And I will say that I am aware, because a lot of work was put into submitting the grant application, that a key component of it is connecting the keys, of course. So that is the overarching project that has to be completed. So where we do possibly talk about not doing the connection piece right away, that would put us in not completing our requirements of the grant. But that said, we do have time still. It's not this year. So it could be put off for a period of time as well if there was a desire to be. Thank you. Councillor Dame, did you have your hand up?
I didn't, but I would like to say something, so I'll take it. Yeah, I think given the the difficulty we know that many are facing right now economically, it is challenging to approve, budget items like this. But I think that we also have to keep in mind that we're making decisions not only for the community of right now, but for the community of 5 years from now and for the community of our children's future. And so sometimes we have to ask for our residents to look down the road with us, look down the future, and see the benefit of our decisions for generations to come. And for me, this is one of those things where I think that we need to see it through. We've got it this far, and putting it off is going to likely increase the costs, and it's going to drag it out. And there's a value in keeping a ball rolling and seeing things through, so that you can put a stamp on it and finish it and move on to the next thing. So I'll be supporting this, but I would also like to add that I do think that it's important that if this is one of our, if this is a priority right now, we'll have to have a good hard look at some of the other, call it nice to have, non-essential projects that we might be considering right now, and see if we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. So that's something we'll have to consider as we head into our budget discussions. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Other comments? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that the amendment to the motion as written is of great importance, in that the funding comes from a dedicated source of grant funding that we have already received and are under an obligation to dispose of. The taxation route, if it was funded through taxation, I note is already included in the 2023-2027 capital plan. So it's not a new item. It's an item that's already been accounted for. I know we're just going into budget now, but in retrospect, the 2023 to 2017 financial plan showed an increase of 7.6% to be expected this year, less than what it was last year. So it's already included from taxation, and we've already successfully planned for a lower tax increase. We'll see when we get through budget as to how much we're able to achieve that or improve upon it. But certainly if we were to take that money from the community fund, then there'd be a significant reduction of, I'm just going to guesstimate, but about 4% to the budget by taking that out of taxation. So, sorry, 4.5. Thank you, Councillor Mealy. Madam Mayor, I would be very much in support of that motion, especially with the amendment to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patola. Councillor Haggard.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the Growing Communities Fund, and there is certain criteria that we can only use it for certain things. It can't be used to lower taxation increases. It can be used primarily for infrastructure, and this certainly is an infrastructure project in our community, and was also identified as a priority in our strategic plan. So I will be voting in support of this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick comment too. And committee of the whole meeting, I did ask if the path was going to go in front of the waterfront, and it will eventually, and it will come out of maybe the sale or however we're going to word it, the lease and that. So that money will come out of that. So I just wanted to mention that to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dame.
Thanks. Just for clarity's sake, I'm not sure if I heard exactly correctly, but I think you may have, through the chair to Councillor Mealy, I believe a 1% tax increase this year will be 277. Yeah, I just want to make sure for the public's information, it will be $277,588. Thank
you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to just add a little voice to that. There's sort of three elements. I really empathize with Councillor Mealy's considering as far as sort of putting a hold on it. But I just feel contrary to that. There's a couple of things. The possibility of jeopardizing our funding is one of them. the restructuring of the current contracts that we now have in place where all the contractors are ready to go. And we'd have to sort of put that off, and circumstances and of course prices would change. And the other part is more in tune with what Councillor Dame was saying, which is that this is an investment. This is an investment in our community. And it's good not just for today, but for tomorrow, for not just us, but our children and families. And it's going to really improve the community. It's going to attract more people who are going to want to live here because they want to live in Port Alberni, not necessarily just work here. They're coming here to live here because of the lifestyle. So those are 3 reasons. I've walked the path. I can barely wait for it to be finished. I think it's fantastic. So I'll be voting to move ahead with this. But thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I do appreciate the fact that it wouldn't come out of taxation with that amendment. And I appreciate Councillor Haggard's clarification that it comes for infrastructure. What I will say is what can we do with $1.25 million elsewhere in infrastructure in the community? And that's where I'll leave it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no more comments on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 2, Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society recommendations from the January 15th Committee of the Whole. So Council, we do have a number of motions here, and I think they're all lumped together with the exception of we had a couple that we made at the end of our meeting. And I think we left those at the end. Yeah, I just want to double check. It was a long meeting. That was, if we were tired at the end of it, it was because it was 11 o'clock at night. Thank you. Okay, so we do have the additional items on here. Okay, so I think we should go through these one by one, and just if we need to have additional discussion on them, we can do that. So Councillor Mealy, I'm going to just go to you to be the reader of all of these motions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to say Councillor Dame, but his voice is not very good today. Poor guy. I don't want to do that to you. So we will go one by one then. So first one is that council direct staff to enter into formal agreements with the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society regarding activities at the Roundhouse and McLean Mill. And that's a motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Discussion. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The intent is one that I would certainly support. The wording is a little off, and not our standard wording, which would be something along the lines of that the administration negotiate a formal agreement with Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society and bring that agreement back to council for approval. It's just telling staff, which is probably not appropriate, administration would be better to enter into a formal agreement, is a little bit over delegating, I think.
I agree. Did you want to make an amendment to the motion?
I don't know that I could amend the motion. It's just too wordy to actually just remove a term or another. Actually, so I would amend, okay, I'll try. Let's see if it works. That council direct to remove staff and add administration, to remove enter into and say negotiate formal agreements or negotiate formal agreements with the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society regarding activities of the Roundhouse and McLean Mill, and return the negotiated agreement to council for approval.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Second. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Councillor Mealy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to rescind and we could try again, but that's fine. We can do it this way. I guess the question is what negotiations are needed between us and the Industrial Heritage Society? I think it would be a standard agreement as we've done in the past, but through you, Madam Mayor, maybe to staff to clarify what negotiations are needed.
Thank you. Good question. Go to RCAO.
Thank you for the question, and I'll try to answer it. Usually we do enter into an agreement and we'll propose an agreement to, excuse me, the association. And then if there's any changes that are outside the scope, then we would come to council. So whether it's negotiations, we would have to bring all leases back to council.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe as long as it comes back to council in a very timely manner, I'll be okay with that. But as long as it comes back to council by next meeting or whatever, as long as it doesn't take too long, then I'd be in support of this.
CEO.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm not sure we'll have it back before next meeting, as we'll just be entering. There hasn't been current agreements on these two sites, so there may be a little bit of work to go back and forth with the Industrial Heritage Society. We do have an existing agreement at the museum or the heritage site up at the old rink. There isn't an existing agreement there, but the other two are starting from scratch. I'm sure administration will get right on it though, with the intent of having it back as soon as possible.
Thank you. And Councillor Mealy, I'm assuming your intent with that comment is just to hope that it coming back to council doesn't slow the process down and rather we still expedite that work.
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's exactly it. I just want to make sure it does come back in a timely manner, and through you to staff and Mr. Fox. I would have assumed in the past that the city would have had an agreement already in place for the roundhouse. So, but maybe it's in paper form downstairs, so that's okay. So thank you very much. I appreciate the information.
Thank you. On the motion, sorry, have we voted on the amendment yet? Okay. On the amendment to the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And any comments on the full motion as amended? Seeing none, on the motion as amended, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And Councillor Mealy, if you want to continue with the second one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council include $125,000 as part of the 2024-2028 financial plan discussion for the purpose of relocating the two-spot locomotive to this train station.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Comment from Councillor Douglas? Or was it just seconding? Okay. Any comments? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just because I know we covered it in the meeting, but in talking to the Industrial Heritage Society, if the track is done ahead of time, this may be done a lot cheaper with it rolling down itself for maybe the last ride. So, which would be kind of a cool little event, but it's all in the future. But I do believe that if it doesn't happen this year, it is something that can happen in another year. So,
thank you, Councillor Dane.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm just wondering if I'm not sure that if we're not even sure that we're moving ahead with all the various pieces of this, and we're now sort of deciding that it would make most sense to have the track in place before we do this to save money, if we should even be including it in the discussion. I suppose it doesn't mean that we're funding it this year or doing the project this year, but I'm just hesitant to see where it exactly fits best. If it would benefit us to have a little more cemented of what the future of this whole project is before we begin discussing $125,000 to move the train. I'm just posing that question to council.
Thank you. I think those are good questions to be asking right now. Councillor Solda.
Well, Madam Mayor, I've stated at the committee of the whole meeting, I don't look at it. I look at it in a different version. That is, it's a tourism opportunity for tourists that come down to the train. I would love it moved yesterday, and you've heard this before. It's just because tourists love that. And again, where it was parked in the past, I used to, as a kid, say, hey, why did they put it right there? You can't get pictures taken unless you go right in the middle of the street and get up there. So I just think of a tourism opportunity, and I think we're looking at tourism opportunities, and this would be a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note in reviewing our strategic priorities in the corporate strategic plan for 2023-2027 that heritage, or conservation is probably a better word, is not included. And although display of the two-spot would be certainly come under the tourism principle, which is one of our objectives, I would say I have to concur with Councillor Dame in the appropriate assessment of whether this is the best spending of the $125,000 and whether or not that should be in consideration with any other plans that we have that include tourism as part of tourism. So I think that it would be more appropriate that this would go to the Parks Recreation and Heritage Master Plan, since really it is part of heritage and in conjunction with all the rest of the concerns of the West Vancouver Island Heritage Society.
Thank you, Councillor Patola. I think I would like to make an amendment to the motion. So it currently reads that council include $125,000 as part of the 2024 to 2028 financial plan discussion for the purpose of relocating the two-spot locomotive to the train station. I think I'd like to amend, first of all, that council include up to $125,000 as part of the 2024 to 2028 financial plan discussion, with final decision to come following the Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
I'll second it, but
Okay, amendment seconded, moved by me, seconded by Councillor Solda, and I'll go to Councillor Solda for comment.
Madam Mayor, the only thing I'm not excited about is the waiting for the plan to come out, because we've heard at the Committee of the Whole, it might be 2024 at the end, and, you know, and it's a long ways away, and we're going to miss that opportunity with the tourism.
Thank you, and I'll just speak to the amendment firstly to say that I think the intent when we discussed this at the Committee of the Whole was not necessarily to do this work this year anyways. I think we heard from the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage that they felt there may be cost savings with this project if we were to get some of the track improvements done prior, and I think our staff concurred with that. So I think this isn't necessarily a 2024 project regardless. If it is going to be, but it rather to include in the 2024 to 2028 financial plan, I think what we're trying to do on a regular basis here is plan further out rather than have a project slotted into this year and then try to deal with the rest of our budget from there. We did the same with the Canal Beach Pier project. We are including it in the 5-year financial plan and looking at where it's going to make the most sense rather than slotting it into this year. And I'd like to see us follow the same approach with this project, recognizing it's a good project, it's a good opportunity, but it's not necessarily a this year priority. Let's plan for it further out, as we did with the Key to Key, which those budget amounts have been budgeted into our 5-year financial plan for the last 3 or 4 years, and now we're getting to the final stages of them, and they're not a surprise because we've had it budgeted. So I think this is following good process, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Patola that we really shouldn't make this decision until we have the 5-year or the Parks and Recreation Master Plan done. And because we don't necessarily see this as a 2024 project as it is, it's not going to hold us up. So that's my argument for the amendment, and then we can discuss the final motion. And I don't see any more comments on the amendment, so I will call the question on that. All in favor? None opposed, carried. And any comments on the motion as amended? Seeing none on the motion as amended, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Councillor Mealy, would you like to read the third item there?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, I would ask if we were to read the motion or the recommendation as written, I have a problem with that. I'll be voting against it, so I would ask that someone else make that motion. Actually, no,
Thank you.
I
Or
apologize.
you're welcome to read a different version of the motion.
Oh, well then, Madam Mayor, geez, I wouldn't want to go against the recommendations of the Committee of the Whole, but all it is, it would be just to delete the last part. So if I may, I move that council defer directing staff to act on any rail crossings, associated track or provisional grants for the operation of the Alberni Pacific Railway until results of the grant application to the Island Coastal Economic Trust are available to the public. And that's the end of my motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. And did you want to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just merely, and for people who are on camera or viewing this on YouTube, the rest of the recommendation is, and full costing of all operational and capital needs for the next 10 years are understood. So during the Committee of the Whole meeting, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, the Island Coastal Economic Trust information will be finished, we'll get that information next month, whereas the operational capital needs for the next 10 years will take the full year, in which that will absolutely stop rail in this community for this year. So that's why I made the motion as is, because at least we'll know Island Coastal Economic Trust's information next month, and if there is a chance to run the rail this year, there still will be. The rest of the motion, if read, will nullify that, and we are not going to have rail this year in any way.
Thank you, Councillor Mealy. And I was going to make a slightly different variation of so that's okay. I think yours gets to the same point. Mine was going to be the the full motion as it was presented. However, with the exception of council having the ability to consider the 2 rail crossings that would enable the short track to run this year. I think yours gets us to the same place. And so, council, if we can rehash the conversation that we kind of had already at committee of the whole, and I think myself and Councillor Mealy voted against it. And, you know, so we just want to have a little bit more discussion today. I think the long discussion we had at Committee of the Whole recognized that there is not, at this point in time today, enough confidence from Council in the plan that was put forward to us in order to support full operation of the train as it was presented. However, I did hear a pretty decent amount of support from Council for looking at the alternative of just running the speeder along the short track this year. I recognize there's still concern, there's still a lot of questions, and it may not be a viable option for this year, but I did hear a willingness from council to consider it as an option. And I think that in kind of what got lost in all of the discussion was the fact that this motion, as we originally read it, would not enable that from happening, because later on in the agenda, we did approve my motion, which was to try to make that happen for this year and at least explore the options. And this one kind of was, canceled that out maybe. So I'm not sure if the wording of this as it is if council would be supportive of it or not, but I think the intent here is to only explore that smaller operation of the speeder for this year along the short track. No commitment to making it happen because we need an amended plan from Industrial Heritage Society. We need sign off from technical safety. We need a lot of things, and it may not be able to happen for this year. But if there's a desire to explore it, I think this is what that enables. And I'll go to council for discussion. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that this item should have been maybe last in the list because what we're suggesting is that we don't spend money on rail crossings if we don't need them. And there are other provisos further on in this list that would or could possibly influence whether or not rail is successful. Those would be ability to obtain insurance under the city for the Industrial Heritage Society, and whether or not Technical Safety BC gives permitting for that to happen. Those are 2 other preconditions that must happen before rail runs. So with fingers crossed, the rail will run. That point, I think we should repair the rail crossings. But until that point is known that rail is going to run, that's a significant amount of money to be spending again on something that may be moot. Again, I hope it's not. Again, under the idea of Fun Port Alberni, the train whistle is fun for Port Alberni. So if we can make it happen, that'd be great. But I don't think we should put the cart before the horse.
Thanks for the comments. Other comments? Councillor Douglas.
I think the motion as it's been amended by Councillor Mealy satisfies my support in any case. I just wanted to point out, if we aren't aware, there is a gentleman from the society here, if we did have a question about whether this is workable for them in terms of operating the speeder at the very least at some point. But, you know, if you want to propose that, but otherwise this has my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Dame.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually prefer the motion as it was originally written, just for the reason that I would personally prefer to know the operational capital needs for the next 10 years before we. I understand that the idea being that if an IST grant is secured, then there would be no cost to the city, I think is the intent. Am I correct in that? Oh, okay, well, given that, I certainly, before we spend any money on this at all, I would want to know, have a good idea of the operational capital needs for the next 10 years. So I won't be supporting as written, and I would prefer that it stay as it is personally.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Solda.
So, Madam Mayor, are the tracks under the community investment plan, could we take some money out of that grant at all? Because it is infrastructure, right?
You're meaning not the Community Investment Fund, but the Growing Communities Fund. I think we could ask our Director of Finance if that would be something. He's going to tell us that he would need to look into it. Thank you. A possibility for sure. So I think that's a great question, and I think that if this motion passes, I'm just going to summarize kind of, I think, what the options are here. If this motion was to pass, then there will be more work done on the plan, potentially with industrial heritage, and a potential budget brought back to the city. Through budget process, we will have at least then the opportunity to determine if we want to repair those rail crossings. If council does wish to repair the rail crossings, at that point in time, our Director of Finance could explore if that could be done through the Growing Communities Fund. If this motion fails, none of that discussion will happen this year. It would happen at next year's budget if it is brought back at that point. If this motion fails and the other motion as originally presented passes, I should say, then we would not be exploring any rail operations or costs associated for this year. So I think that hopefully summarizes that if we do pass this motion and we do continue to explore, we would have the opportunity to look at a variety of different ways to fund it. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just get some clarification? If they just go to the short track, do they need both crossings done, or can we just get one done? I'm not sure. I'm a little confused on that point. Do we have to do Dunbar Crossing and the Stratford Athol Crossing as well?
Through the chair, I think if this passes and subsequent motions and it all comes to be, we would bring the necessary crossings. I believe there are 2, depending on where the train is traveling along the waterfront area.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this? Councillor Patola.
Just a wording issue, Madam Mayor, and I would apply to amend that motion not to read that council direct administration to defer to act. Otherwise, we're the way it's read that essentially the motion is that we simply don't direct staff, but we're actually directing staff to defer acting.
Thank you. So that we're directing staff to defer. That's right. Okay. So it enables steps being taken after the iced tea grant, the results of that are completed. Okay. Thank you for that. And I think that could be a friendly amendment. It doesn't change the intent. Okay. If everyone's good with that, thank you. Okay. Is everyone clear on the motion as it's currently written and the intention? Thank you. Okay. Then on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And Councillor Mealy, if you want to continue with the next one.
Next up, Madam Mayor, I move that council direct staff to obtain a quote from the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia to add the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society as an associate member to the city's current insurance policy.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Discussion. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering why council would need to make such a motion. I would think that that's completely within the purview of administration to obtain information with regards to the activities of the city and who the city as a council contracts with to provide services. So I'm not sure that we need a motion to direct staff or administration to do that.
Thank you. Mike, could you speak to that?
Yes, through the chair, I'll try and answer the question. I guess usually we wouldn't seek what the quote would be until we understand the full scope of work, everything that's happening. So if we approach Municipal Insurance Association to include industrial heritage on the roundhouse, McLean Mill, and then the short track, once we have that figured out, then we could apply to see what it would cost. I guess through these motions, we're going to be deciding on what part we're getting the quotes on. So again, I understand what you're saying. It would make it clearer for us through these on what exactly we're getting the quota from the MIA on with these as a block. But standing alone, I understand what you're talking about.
Thank you. Any additional comments? No. Okay. Seeing none on the motion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Padol, you
No,
turned your
it's-
microphone on.
Good answer.
Thank you. That's great. It was a good answer. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And Councillor Mealy, if you want to continue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council direct staff to confirm with the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society any outstanding items from the third-party contractor safety plan requirements, and for the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society provide the city with a quote for infrastructure replacement, at the Old Time Logging Show for council consideration during the 2024-2028 financial plan review.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Discussion on this? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And again, wording, I'm not sure for the second part of that motion that council is in a position to direct the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society to do anything. We could request a quote. I would think that within their normal business practices, they would provide that if they're seeking the city to assist financially with that show. But I'm just not sure that we have any authority to demand an independent society to do anything.
Thank you. Mike?
Through the chair, if I'm reading the motion as I see it, it would be directing staff to confirm with the Western Society. Not seeing where we're directing them, we're obtaining a quote. So staff was just confirming with them and confirming the quote from them if they want to operate. If they don't want to operate, I'm guessing we would bring that information back to council as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And Councillor Mealy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council direct staff to obtain a quote from the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia for insurance coverage for the Old Time Logging Show and for the city to explore entering into a formal agreement with Mosaic for the purpose of accessing Mosaic's land for the Old Time Logging Show.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Douglas. Comments? Councillor Haggard.
Because we're under contract with the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce to operate this property, I'm wondering why they're not included in the motion to get their permission as well.
Through the chair, I believe the Chamber of Commerce agreement deals with the retail side and lower on in McLean Mill and doesn't extend out to the rest of the actions that take place on the McLean Mill site. So this would be under the Industrial Heritage Society portion of that we're going to be working on an agreement to about the activities that would take place on the mill site.
Thank you. Other discussion on this piece? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council request that the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society prepare a community-focused train operation for the first season featuring a speeder use and community events.
Thank you. And is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Okay, comments? Councillor Mealy.
No, that's just, I understand this, Madam Mayor. We're just merely requesting the APR and the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society just to prepare another plan for the first season using speeder use. So I do appreciate looking at any plans that we can.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried, none opposed. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
There was item 7 coming up, also had to deal with this, and I was wondering if we could deal with that now, which is that all right, Madam Mayor? And that was just the motion that was at the end of the committee of the whole meeting, which is that council direct staff to contact Technical Safety BC to clarify what is required to operate on the short track use as proposed by the Alberni Pacific Railway.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patola. Thank you, and this will give us, I think, a lot of clarity on how to move forward and if we can move forward this year as well before too much work is done to get that answer. Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
I just think anytime we can get it in writing from Technical Safety BC and make it public, then that's good. And then we can go to the public and say, this is the reasons what we have to do this or this, and just right from the horse's mouth, I guess we put it that way.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, motion moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. We will move on to item number 3, 2024 Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Convention. And so this is recommendations from the Committee of the Whole, as well as some of the discussion that happened at the Committee of the Whole and recommended motions that were requested. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I haven't had a hockey game in so long, so this is good. I had totem and my voice is back. So already, would you like me to read all of them at once, Madam Mayor?
Let's read them one by one.
One
just
by
in
one?
case.
All right. I move that council direct staff to submit the following resolutions for consideration to the 2024 Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, AVICC, Annual General Meeting and Convention. 1, the AVICC and the Union of British Columbia Municipalities urgently request the province of British Columbia to provide modern and reliable communications, such as Starlink, to responding agencies that are handling motor vehicle incidents on the province's behalf to ensure seamless communication and enhance the safety and effectiveness of responders, and further, that the province of British Columbia collaborate with the telecommunication providers to improve overall communications infrastructure in areas where motor vehicle incidents occur frequently, including expanding coverage, improving network reliability, and exploring innovative solutions to address communication challenges in remote and underserved areas.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. We've had discussion on this. I'm not seeing anything additional. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the AVICC and UBCM urgently appeal to the province of British Columbia to take immediate steps to adequately staff and operate pre-hospital care services autonomously, assuming full responsibility for the pre-hospital care, alleviating the burden on local governments, and ensuring the provision of efficient and effective emergency medical services, or alternatively, that the province of British Columbia take immediate steps to provide adequate funding to local governments to cover the cost of fire department first responder programs to help alleviate the financial strain on local governments and ensure continued provision of essential pre-hospital care services.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Comments on this? Seeing none. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item C.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the AVICC and UBCM urgently appeal the province of British Columbia to develop an equitable police services funding program for all BC municipalities and regional districts that take into account the financial capacity and population size of each jurisdiction, as well as the additional demands placed on the police services due to systemic social issues outside of a municipality's mandate.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. And I just wanted to thank staff for their work on this one. I know that we have had a lot of resolutions at UBCM kind of speaking to some of the inequities in how police services are funded between municipalities and regional districts, as well as some of the other challenges. And I think that this motion really well encapsulates a very complex issue. So thank you to all the staff who worked on this, and looking forward to representing it at UBCM. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the AVICC and UBCM appeal to the province of British Columbia to provide long-term sustainable funding for public libraries in BC, and further, that the province ensures that BC libraries receive regular increases to provincial government funding in subsequent years.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Comments on this? Seeing none. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the AVICC and UBCM appeal to the province of British Columbia to increase funding for rural colleges in British Columbia to support their operations, programs, and services, and further that the province develop a standard of college funding more closely reflecting the real cost of providing required training and education to the population of rural British Columbia.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mealy, for all your reading of our motions today. Item number 4, our CMP Contract and Administrative Services 2024 to 2028 Financial Plan. And we've got our recommendation from the Committee of the Whole here. Who would like to read this one? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council direct funding within the 2024 to 2028 financial plan related to RCMP contract and administrative services as follows. Fund 32 of 34 RCMP officers as per the contract commitment and is based on actual utilization. Allocate funds from the emergency reserve to fund community policing services in 2024, moving to taxation for the years 2025 forward.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Discussion. I think there was one piece here of consideration, and certainly one thing that I would like to discuss is that rather than just saying moving to taxation for years 2025 and forward, I would like to say, and council consider moving to taxation for future years. I would like to see further information about our officer utilization before we make the decision to fully make that change. I know that it has been trending in a different direction, but that may be short term. So I think that's a small amendment, but I will make it as an amendment that council, and sorry, one other amendment, and for discussion here, but there was discussion about the emergency reserve, and rather than wording it the emergency reserve, rather word it from the emergency surplus to fund community policing services. And that was a recommendation from staff that just cleans the motion up a little bit for where we're actually funding that from. So I will make that as an amendment that we change the word reserves to surplus and that we add in further council consider moving to taxation for the years 2025 forward. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Comments? Councillor Solda and then Councillor Patola.
Madam Mayor, the two motions, well, one motion, but could we not just separate them? Because they're, I don't know, they're two different ones, although they're to do with RCMP.
We can separate anything at the request of a councillor with no motion required. So we will do that. Thank you, Councillor Solda. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Given the separation, I'll confine my comments to the first of the two, which is funding 32 of 34 RCMP officers. I heard the reasons why we only need to fund 32. We're under a contractual obligation to fund 34. I think we should fund 34. There is nowhere else that I've seen in the budget where we underfund a program on purpose. And I've heard the reasoning, which is, oh, well, if we need the money, we'll just come back to council and ask for more money, which is exactly what the budgeting process is supposed to avoid. So we're supposed to be giving our best estimates of what it's going to cost. And although in the past there have been less than 34 officers provided, and we haven't had to pay for 34 officers, that is not, past results are not an indication of future performance. And certainly, although we can say based on actual utilizations historically, we really haven't done an actuarial analysis of it. We've done just look and see what we think. So it's my opinion that we should fund full 34. If in fact we only want to fund 32, we should request a deployment of 32 officers.
Thank you, Councillor Patola. And I think it's important to note that we do fund 34. We just only fund 32 from general revenue and taxation, and we fund 2 officers from our emergency surpluses. So 34 officers are funded. It is the allocation of where that funding comes from. And speaking to your comments of we should give our best estimate of how much the service is going to cost, if we were to do that, we would actually fund 30.5 because that is what historically the service has cost us. So that would be underfunding what our contractual obligation is. Our contractual obligation is for 34. I would say it is unfortunately a bit of a flaw in how the service is how we're required to budget for the service when we typically do end up not being able to utilize the full amount of our contract, but we are still required to fund the full amount of the contract, and we are funding the full amount of the contract. We are just not funding it all from taxation. I would actually like to see a system where we do not fund the full amount, because I think that we are overtaxing the public by funding 34 when we know we're not going to receive 34 officers, as we historically have not. That said, we do know that that is slightly shifting and has been shifting over the last year only to utilizing a higher number. And that's a trend we need to watch. And if that continues, then we're going to have to relook at how we budget this going forward. But I think it's really important to note that we are funding 34 officers. We are just only taxing for 32, and we are using reserves to cover the rest. Councillor Solda and then Councillor Patola.
So I'm kind of curious, Madam Mayor, if we're actually funding 34 RCMP officers, why is this in here? Is it because it's been in the past, or you know where I'm going with that? So I'm really having an issue on that one.
Maybe Andrew, you could come forward. We are funding 34 officers,
understand.
and it's just where the funds are coming from. But you're asking, I think, why, just because there's a consideration of changing the practice. I think that's why it's coming forward.
Madam Mayor, I was in the attempt to bring this forward to council or the committee, that was trying to make sure that before we get to the financial plan, we set everything as we have done in the past. So looking for that confirmation. We fund based on, like we commit every year in a letter to the RCMP E-Division to commit to 34 officers. It's just the actual utilization has been around that 30 range for many years. So that's why council, I believe, I'm not going to make a guess, but I think council in the past has made the decision that we would only fund 32 in the budget process out of 34 to limit the amount of surplus that's created from that situation.
Thank you. So just confirmation, this is coming forward just to confirm the direction prior to, so that we can properly input budget.
Okay, fair enough.
I've got Councillor Patola and then Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I must say I share Councillor Solda's confusion. If you, Madam Mayor, is correct that we fund 34 of 34 officers, a motion to say that we fund 32 of 34 officers is not correct. And if what we are trying to do is do what we've always done, which is fund 34 officers, the motion should say we fund 34 of 34 officers. The difference that is trying to be accomplished here is that 32 are funded from new taxation and an extra 2 are funded from a reserve or surplus. I'll say surplus because that's the better terminology. So from surplus of the previous year. So that's what the motion should say. I still wouldn't agree with it, but that's what the motion should say.
I think that's an excellent point. Now, I will remind council that we actually already have an amendment on the floor for the second part of this. So we are kind of out of line with the conversation that we're having right now, because we're going to vote on the motion, or sorry, on the amendment for the second part. Then we're going to come back and vote on the motion separated out at the request of Councillor Solda of the first part. Then we'll get to the second part. But when we do get to that first part, which is 2 steps away currently, maybe we could make an amendment to that motion, because I think you're right. The wording of this motion is confusing. If it did say to fund 32 from taxation and fund 2 officers from emergency surplus, that would be more in line with what the actual intent is, rather to fund less. So excellent point. So before we have any more discussion on this first part, are there any comments on the amendment to the second part?
Okay.
Seeing none, is everyone clear on what the amendments were?
Sorry.
It was to change from emergency reserve to emergency surplus, and then also for council to consider moving to taxation in years 2025 and forward. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And again, it's just getting the wording right so that we all understand the same thing. And I think actually, as taxing this is for individuals watching on YouTube, we're making progress. And so with regards to the change from emergency reserve to emergency surplus, I'd suggest that the wording simply be surplus without the phrase emergency, because barring any definition somewhere else, I'm not sure what the emergency surplus is, whether that's from emergency services, including fire department, if that's just from police services, or where that's from.
Thank you. I think that's a friendly amendment, and I will accept it as the person who moved the amendment. And I think Councillor Solda seconded it. She's accepting as well. So we're going to cross out the word emergency and just leave in surplus. Councillor Mealy.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, and I apologize, just maybe I can get staff's take on that, if that's actually what we're trying to accomplish here, or is it just wording?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, I think that's fine.
Thank you. I think once we get to a point of formalizing the reserve, which I believe is coming to our next committee of the whole, we probably will want to make a further change to this, which is that it comes from that reserve, which is populated by specifically the RCMP surplus. I think in generality, though, at the end of the day, RCMP surplus is a part of the general surplus, and this is going to be further kind of clarified as we continue to move forward on some of these technicalities. Councillor Patola.
Madam Mayor, given that we're expecting to have the explanation of all of this confusion at the next committee of the whole meeting, which would then likely be referred to the next council meeting, I would make a motion to refer this motion to the next council meeting.
We have an amendment on the floor, so you'll have to wait till after we vote on our amendment.
We don't have an amendment, so.
We do have an amendment on the floor for the second part of this motion.
Right, so I understand that currently the motion on the floor is the first part of the motion having been severed, which is Fund 32 of 34 officers as per the contract commitment based on actual utilization. There's no amendment.
Prior to the request for it to be severed, which isn't a motion, the amendment was already on the floor. So we'll vote on the motion, and then council could make a motion to defer this. Okay. Any more comments on the amendment? Seeing none. On the amendment, all in favor? Carried. Opposed, sorry. Carried. Thank you. If somebody would like to make a motion to defer this, that could be done now. There has been a request for it to be severed, so if it does get deferred, when it comes back, it would be read in two separate portions. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd make that request. It just seems like we have a cart but no horse yet, and we're expecting a horse in a week.
Thank you. And that would be a formal motion to defer and not a request.
Correct.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion to defer?
For discussion.
Okay. Moved and seconded for discussion. Thank you. Is there discussion? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to ask you through staff how that will affect anything going forward, if there is contractual commitments and things that we need to meet before that next meeting.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure if there is, I don't know if Mr. McGilford would have the answer to that, but I'm not sure if that would affect our timing for confirming with the RCMP.
Thank you, CAO, through the mayor. Nothing at all. I think the intent of that to be brought forward was to get the confirmation from committee, provide information to the committee of the whole to make decisions as we move forward. So there's absolutely no problem with deferring this.
Thank you. So no problem with deferring it. I would also, we're going to go to our director of corporate, our corporate officer, but I would also say there's no harm in passing this and continuing with it. I think that if we make changes to our reserves, this is still effective and means the exact same thing, which is that this would be funded through surplus. So my preference is going to be just to move forward with this. Donna.
My apologies. I just wanted to note it's postpone and not defer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the motion to postpone, all in favor? Opposed? Motion defeated. Thank you. And we will now go to item number 1 on this, which is currently as written to fund 32 of 34 RCMP officers as per the contract commitment and as based on actual utilization. So that is already considered moved and seconded. We are considering it on its own. Would anybody like to make an amendment to that? Councillor Solda.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. A lot of the public think we're just going to cut to 32 police officers. And I like what Councillor Patola had said and yourself regarding let's take it and that we are still going to go ahead with our commitment of 34 police officers. However, it's wordsmith. I don't care, but long as it's stated as such.
Okay, I will make an amendment then that we fund 32 RCMP officers from taxation and 2 RCMP officers from surplus as per the contract commitment and as based on the actual utilization. Amendment seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments on the amendment? Seeing none on the amendment, all in favor? Carried, none opposed, and any comments on the amended motion? Seeing none on the motion as amended, all in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. And on the second portion now, I will read it out so everyone's clear. To allocate funds from the surplus to community policing services in 2024, and council consider moving to taxation for the years 2025 forward. And that is the motion as amended. Seeing no comments on the motion as amended, all in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Great discussion, everyone. Item number 5, Community Action Team, and this was a recommendation from the January 15th Committee of the Whole meeting as well. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council endorse establishment of a city administrative committee for the Port Alberni Community Action Team and further recommend that the city obtain assurance coverage for appropriate members and volunteers.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Patola. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Item number 6, Vancouver Island Regional Library, recommendation from the January 15th Committee of the Whole. And I will read this one since it was mine, that council engage in further discussions prior to renewal of the lease between the City of Port Alberni and the Vancouver Island Regional Library. Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Comments? Councillor Patola.
This is the picking part of the nitpicking, Madam Mayor. I think that probably what the motion is that council direct administration to engage in further discussions with the Vancouver Island Regional Library prior to renewal of the lease. But I could have that wrong because I'm not a mind reader and I don't intend at all to imply I know what anyone else is thinking. It just seems like that if council is to engage further in discussions, I'm not sure exactly what that causes us to do.
Thank you. I will clarify that it actually was, that's not the intent. The intent is for council and staff to have a discussion about what we would like to achieve from that lease. There was a comment made by the executive director of Vancouver Island Regional Library that one of the things driving their large increase in their budget for the 2024 year was the result of their 5-year leases coming due and them seeing a significant increase. And I would like us to have a conversation about lease rates that we're charging, as we are one of their leases, and we have not given them an increase or any kind of significant increase. I'd also like to, as we would a landlord and as we have with other tenants that we have, I'd like to have a discussion in those lease conversations about improvements to the leased property. And that is something that we regularly do with our tenants. And I think that's something that needs to be done with Vancouver Island Regional Library as well. So I think a bigger conversation about what we would like to achieve, and then we direct staff as a result of that to go back to Vancouver Island Regional Library. And I don't know where that conversation takes place, but probably in camera, I guess. So it's a little awkward that we're talking about it now, and we're going to go have the details of that conversation in camera, but that is the typical process that we follow for leases. And this is public just as a result of the initial conversation with Virl being public. So I could add to that discussion happens in camera, but I think naturally that's where it would take place. Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 7 has already been carried.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
For any assistance that it might provide to the administration, I would make a motion that item 6 be moved in camera.
Thank you. I will second that. Okay. And seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. We'll move on to item number 8, Traffic Advisory Committee recommendation from the January 17th meeting. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the council approve the terms of reference for the Traffic Advisory Committee as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Item number 9, we have development variance permit for 4821 Heath Road. Thank you. I'll just welcome our planner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we've received an application for a development variance permit at 4821 Heath Road. Sorry, one moment. Give me one moment here. I'm doing it. Thank you so much. Do we need to wait for Councillor Dane? Okay, beautiful. So the applicant is requesting to increase the property's maximum coverage from 33% to 38% and to increase the projection distance of an open porch into a required front yard from 1.85 meters to 4.18 meters. And the requested variances would enable the property owner to construct a deck. The subject property is located at the corner of Heaslip Road and Heath Road. The surrounding land has a mix of agricultural, residential, commercial, and institutional zoning. The subject property itself is zoned RR2 semi-rural residential and is occupied by an existing single detached dwelling. The applicant has provided a site plan that shows the location and dimensions of the proposed deck, which is shaded gray in the lower half of the image. And for comparison, the light dashed line shows the distance that a deck would currently be permitted to project under the zoning bylaw. The proposed site plan complies with all other zoning regulations. And so there are a couple important considerations for this application. First, the lot at 4821 Heath Road predates the zoning bylaw and is significantly smaller than the minimum lot size specified for the RR2 zone. And so as a result, the 33% maximum coverage is more restrictive for the subject property than it would be for a typical RR2 property. The existing dwelling already occupies over 31% of the property, and so any further development is greatly restricted. Secondly, according to the zoning bylaw, the subject property's front lot line is the shorter one along Heaslip Road, making the area fronting Heaslip the designated front yard. However, as you can see in the larger image at the bottom, the existing dwelling was built to face Heath Road. And so the technical front yard along Heaslip doesn't actually function as intended. And from a neighborhood character perspective, it's a reasonable place to put a deck to be used for private outdoor space. The Advisory Planning Commission passed a motion at their meeting on December 21st recommending that council support the application. Staff completed all statutory notice requirements, mailing letters to owners and occupants of properties within 100 meters of the subject property, and the city received no responses. The application was reviewed by staff and referred to other city departments. No concerns were raised, and staff don't anticipate significant impacts to surrounding properties as a result of approving the variance. Today, council has the option to authorize the issuance of DVP number 120, granting the variances to maximum coverage and projection distance of an open porch into a required front yard at 4821 Heath Road. Council may alternatively pass a motion to decline issuance of DVP number 120 or may direct staff to provide further information. And staff are recommending that council authorize the issuance of DVP number 120, granting the requested variances at 4821 Heath Road.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I don't mean to catch anybody off guard. I note that there's photographs, aerial photographs provided in the report. But when I went onto Google Maps, not even Google Earth, there's a different photograph. And so I'm not sure about the timing of the two photographs. The only reason I raise that is because the photograph on the current internet availability shows a structure already where the deck is proposed to be placed. I'm just wondering if you have any information.
And through the chair, yes, I did notice that on Google Earth as well. My understanding is that the property owner began to build the deck and then was notified that it wasn't in compliance with the zoning bylaw and so was instructed to apply for a variance.
Thank you, that's great. Any other comments? Okay, Councillor Mealy, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council authorize the issuance of development variant permit number 120, and that the Director of Corporate Services be authorized to sign the permit granting following variances to the zoning bylaw at 4821 Heath Road. 1. Vary section 5.10.2 RR2 site development regulations to increase the maximum coverage from 33% to 38% for a variance of 5%. And 2, vary section 6.12.1 projections to increase the maximum projection of an open porch into a required front yard from 1.85 meters, or 6.1 feet, to 4.18 meters, or 13.7 feet, for a variance of 2.33 meters, or 7.6 feet.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And we will move on to item number 10, 5170 Argyle Street, Port Pub remedial action. And I just want to thank staff for getting this to us. I know this was at the request of council and a lot of concerns that have come forward. And I know also that this report and this amount or this type of step is a significant amount of work to put together. So thanks for all the detail that's included here. I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, through the chair. I was going to mention the same thing and just wanted to thank all the different departments and staff members it takes to put together a report such as this. And it's not something that we take lightly bringing to council. So 5170 Argyle Street is a property that a lot of people refer to as the Port Pub. It was brought to council in October of 2020 to receive a remedial action order from council, which means that they have 30 days to rectify everything that's included in the various violations of the fire code and building codes and some of the bylaws that we have. So at that time, the owner took immediate steps to rectify a lot of those violations, and the remedial action order was stood down, for lack of a better term. And then there were some inspections since 2021 up until the end of 2022, whereas the owner would do just enough to basically keep staff from coming towards council. But in the last 6 months, there have been 4 fire inspections, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of action from the owner. So the last inspection was January 11th of this year, 2024, and it was attended by the Chief Fire Prevention Officer, 2 city building inspectors, and 1 bylaw officer, and as well the building owner, P. Wang. And we've attached a copy of the fire inspection report to this agenda if you'd like to see it online. So there are a number of life and safety fire code violations, and we do have someone here from the Deputy Cross is here from the fire department if there's any questions related to that. But things like fire extinguishers missing, smoke alarms not working, exit doors that are blocked by bags of garbage, exit doors that don't close and lock, sprinklers that are obstructed. So it's quite concerning that these things don't get dealt with. And then there's a number of building code violations like electrical and plumbing and all of that kind of thing. The list is really quite endless. So not to mention, I mean, this is our busiest building in town, not only with the fire department, but with the RCMP, I would suggest as well. We've got some statistics that we've attached to the report as well. However, instead of reading the whole report, I think there's a very large motion there, which can be passed as written, if that's a council's wish, of course. But perhaps I'll just ask for a remedial action order from council and suggest that if you have any questions, we have lots of staff here to answer them.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Solda and then Councillor Haggard.
Madam Mayor, I'm just going to move this motion as written to start with.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Haggard.
And
comments?
I am so happy. I mean, I could dance, you know. This has been really exciting that when I saw this, you don't want to see me dance, but I'm so excited. And if people want to see what it is, what it looks like, go online, take a look through the agenda, and you'll see the pictures and everything. The tenants have reached out and said they're very, very happy that we're moving forward. I got an email and I forwarded it over to our CEO. It's almost like when I look at all the calls that the RCMP and the fire department have had in the past, just recently too, I would love to send an invoice to the landlord to the owner, but I know that doesn't work that way. And when I look at the pictures and I see the roof almost caving in and the ceilings and that, and I think about mold and stuff, and these people, again, everybody knows that what I think about landlords who look after their buildings and their tenants and what's happening there. So I'm really happy, worried about the pests because there's little guys that are starting to run around now, I'm told, because they're hatching, or I guess they hatch. And so there's a lot more to it, and I'm just really, really happy. Thank you to all the staff, to everybody that was involved in it. I love the report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also would like to thank staff for taking this action. I know it's a lot of work and we don't take it lightly, but this is a very, very serious situation in our community. This building is indeed a blight in our community, especially in an area that we're trying to revitalize and encourage people to go to and invest in. So, yeah, I'm really happy to be taking this step. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also too want to echo thanks to staff, thanks to the fire department, thanks to our local police for helping out and putting this together. We have to acknowledge though that these are where people live, and we have to make sure that they have a good living conditions. And no matter where you live in this community, you deserve to have good living conditions. So I do appreciate staff for putting this all together. It's very extensive, and thank you for Councillor Solter for saving my voice. I was ready to do the whole thing. So.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, I just want to echo that this is where people live, and I do think that we shouldn't ignore the challenges of some of the work that may need to get done may end up displacing some tenants, and if that does happen, then I certainly want to make sure that our staff are there to connect with resources and liaise with housing providers in the community to find solutions wherever possible. But I think that this building, like others in our community, has gotten to a point of being absolutely unacceptable. We hear from tenants on a regular basis. I know I do. And I think that anybody who is in that area on a regular basis sees the concerns. And we just cannot allow property owners to let their buildings get run down to this point. I want to also say that I think that I feel for the property owner because this is a difficult building to manage, and I do know that over time he has made some efforts. But if you are going to own a building like this, you need to be prepared to do what it takes and bring in the right supports to manage it properly and make sure that it doesn't degrade to this point. And the point that it is degraded to is simply unacceptable. So I think that we have had some really great success with remedial action orders in the past. We've also had success with, when we've really put our mind to it and focus, with other substandard living situations and finding creative solutions to move people to safer accommodations if the buildings can't be brought up to standard. So I think that hopefully this will end up being an example of a living situation that we've deemed unacceptable that we will see in the near future, it either being brought up to standard and those tenants moving to safe, or those tenants then being in safe, affordable housing, or those tenants finding other options and our resources supporting them in that and having this building not housing people anymore, which of course then puts financial strain on the owner who would not be bringing in revenue to hopefully do something, because we just can't let buildings in our community, we can't let it be acceptable for people to be able to live like this without proper work being done to improve the buildings. With that, Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I fully support this motion and all of the work that staff has done. I too really appreciate it. But I wasn't going to say anything until, Madam Mayor, you spoke about the outcome of this action. And I did want to underline and stress that this action is to improve the living conditions of individuals in that building. This is not an action by the city to at all result in destruction of that building or removal of those premises. It is to improve it, and certainly the motion provides the city with the authority to improve it in case the building owner does not. So sometimes when these things are passed, the rumor grows in the community that, oh no, we're all going to be evicted. And I just want to underline the mayor's comments that this is not an eviction. We're not acting to cause any further stress to the individuals that inhabit that building. We are acting to reduce their stress levels. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely, and thank you for highlighting that. Okay, on the motion, and just for council's clarification, that does include all items 1 through 5 and all of the letters within, so it's completely as written. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. We'll move on to item L11, which was the letter from UBCM on the UBCM Housing Summit. And I believe this is just looking for authorization for councillors to attend the summit. Donna, could you just speak to the letter? I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Through the chair, that's exactly what it is. It's an invitation to attend the Housing Summit for local governments on February 13th and 14th in Vancouver. And just as a side note, we've got some costs here for you. If you were going to attend in person, it would be approximately $1,373 for hotel, ferry mileage, and registration.
Thank you, and just thanks for that clarification, as it did come as a late item. Councillor Haggard.
I see that there's also a virtual option. Is there a cost for that? Because I would like to attend virtually.
Through the chair, it actually does not say on here. It says there is a hybrid option, but we can certainly find out for you.
Thank you. Council, I think any members who, I would support sending anyone virtually and a councillor in person as well. But I personally think that if people can attend virtually, and it's going to be significantly less expensive as a result of lack of travel. So I think there's going to be good value at this conference. I've been to it before. I think others here have as well. Yeah, I think if whoever can attend virtually is fantastic. And if somebody does want to attend in person, there's value in that also. Councillor Petrola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to commend this conference to others to attend. I have not attended this conference in the past. I've attended a similar one at the PCNPHA. And housing is the primary, well, I'm going to say the primary issue facing us right now. There are many other issues that face us, and they often all stem from a housing crisis. It's in the forefront of the federal government and the forefront of the provincial government, and I think that any opportunity to gain knowledge for those that aren't as familiar with housing issues, terminology, and solutions, as I've become, it would be very beneficial.
Thank you. Are there any members of council who are available to attend in person? I'm not, unfortunately. Okay, then I would move that council approve any councillors' registration for the virtual summit for this event. Anyone who's available. Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Okay, discussion. Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. That brings us to the end of new business, so we will move on to question period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council on decisions or recommendations made during the course of the meeting. A maximum of 3 speakers will be permitted. 3 questions will be permitted per speaker. For those participating electronically, I will ask that you use the raise your hand feature and you will be called on to speak in the order which it appears. Are there any members of the public in the room first who would like to ask a question? Yeah, come on forward.
Hello, Council. My name is Kim Bothan, a relatively new resident, just slightly less than 2 years. So I always have lots of questions and thoughts after council meetings. I'll try to be a little bit eloquent. I wanted to commend Councillor Patola on his comments on the council report and the conversation around clarity around what's a city endorsed activity versus an individual councillor's activity. And I've, of course, am supportive of councillors being involved in community in any way possible and understand the workload, et cetera. But I do appreciate clarity around this is, yes, a city-wide, I think you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, thank you for that. A question is on the page 4, the recommendations going to the AGM, the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, AGM. I was looking at item C around developing funding for additional demands, to cover additional demands placed on police services due to systemic social issues, et cetera, and wondering if somewhere in this, I'm sure somewhere in the city, there is some conversation around the weight on police services and social services to address growing mental illness and health problems around addiction, homelessness, et cetera. And is that not necessary through this process? Are there other places where additional funding is being looked at around that? I know some communities are adding actual bodies into to work alongside police officers to address on the street incidents and crises. For instance, is the city, are we looking at that piece somewhere?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And yes, we are in a number of ways. So first off, our community action team is doing some work around what does that look like and what are their potential solutions. CMHA BC has developed a peer assisted teams that are throughout the province and trying to work on sending a peer alongside an RCMP officer or a peer team instead of RCMP officers where there's calls that don't require RCMP. Our council has advocated to get one of those peer assisted teams in the community. There also has been local kind of versions of that through existing service providers in the community who are working on something very similar. And I would say as well that I think you make a good point, and that kind of topic of what are the alternatives to simply just sending police really could be a part of the discussion in the UBCM motion as well. And I think it is broad enough that it does leave the room to, or it leaves room to have that as part of the discussion rather than just looking at how is it funded, but how is it funded as a result of the growing systemic social challenges.
Great, thanks, Madam
Thank
Mayor. Another question. Also commend the staff and council on work going forward around the Port Pub. As a new person to town, one of the first things I did was visit things like local pubs and gathering places. I feel quite strongly about the concept of the third space in a social setting within a community, and it does feel to me, I could be corrected, but it feels to me that there's a bit of a shortage of those community gathering places here. I think a number of them were lost through the pandemic, for instance, and I've been sad watching the Port Pub, even in my short time here, really degrade. And the pub space as well as the housing. The pub is a hub, and so I just want to say, please keep consideration of those sorts of spaces in any of this kind of work too. There happens to be a property in my own neighborhood that I am quite worried about, and so that a request is to keep that third space concept in mind in any of this work, but also a direct question in terms of what gets a property on the radar of city staff and council.
Yeah, thank you. Great comments. And I would say if there is a property in your neighborhood, if you wanted to pass that along to our CAO after the meeting, certainly something can be brought publicly to council at a meeting. But the best first course of action is definitely to bring it to staff, typically at a bylaw level. So we do have bylaw officers that you can report concerns to in a bylaw office on 3rd Avenue, our public safety building. But you're welcome to speak to our staff here that we have at the meeting today and to talk about some of the specific locations. It very much could be that our staff are already aware and working on that specific concern, but regardless, it's good to bring it forward and then you can always follow up on
Okay,
next steps.
thanks very much. That's all for me.
Thank you. And I'll just ask now if there's any members of the public attending virtually who have a question that they would like to ask. Okay, and I do see that we have one person on, however, there's no hand raised. So just reiterating, because this is a new process, that if there's anyone attending virtually who would like to ask a question, the process is just to use your raise hand feature, and then we will call on you. And seeing no raised hand, I will move on. And would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Patola. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. None opposed. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.